walk out.
And as you're mixing one of these gigs as they're happening, and you're using the screen, to do so, could you see people in the audience and suspect them of bootlegging and recording? Because there's a
No,
story, isn't there, about
no.
a guy with a turban at one of the gigs?
There was a one of Prince's security guys, his head of security around 2000, early 2000s. Trevor Allen. Trevor came to me and said, Scottie, if you ever see anyone who you suspect, just get a hold of us on the radio and we'll just throw him right out. Because he's really in a hot, he was really, really protective of the One Night Alone tour.
Yeah.
And I said, cool. And I never saw anyone. I know it was going on. I'm sure it was. It had to be. But I was always so busy mixing and focusing on what I was doing that I was the last thing I was doing was looking for bootleggers.
Yeah.
I was really let down by one engineer, used to be Prince's monitor engineer. I run into him at a venue. I can't get too specific. Ran into him at a venue that Prince was playing on the West Coast. And I walked in and I was like, hey. And he said, hey, I'm your tech for the day. And I said, cool. Wow, this must be like coming home for you. And he's like, yeah, this is going to be great. I haven't seen him perform and whatever. I think he was fired at let go at some point. In the course of me setting up my soundboard, Prince he came in and started to rehearse. They came up to me and said, they need a press feed. There'll be a camera crew here for the first 3 songs. Do you have a press feed? It was an analog desk. I said, yeah, I can probably use monitor out. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I walked around the desk and opened the doghouse and looked down. And in the doghouse was a mini disc recorder recording. And I went, what? And I look up, and that guy who was running across the venue, holding a coffee, but running across the venue to intercept me. He ran up to me, and as I was looking confused, like, what the hell is this? It was a blue mini disc. I went, what is? And he went, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't say anything. And I went, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't know. I just wanted part of my past to be, I don't know. Please don't say anything. He begged me, because he would have gotten fired from his job at that venue as well. And I went, no, man, don't worry about it. Oh God, don't. I ejected the mini disc and broke it up and right in front of him, put it in my pocket. And it was just all torn, it's a little silver, tore it all up and shoved it in my pocket and just went, man, I was so disappointed in that guy. Yeah. And because I always felt like I was protecting Prince's best, or I had to protect all the artists' best interests. And so, but do I think Prince was above reproach? Do I think he was above that? No. I'm sure he released certain things. He was the only one that the motive, the opportunity, the availability, and the know-how to mix it leisurely, mix it, choose a reverb, release it, turn up the solo, and then mix it. Nobody else, everyone else would have been mixing on a, like a thief in the night with, black, looked like a ski mask on. So,
yeah.
So sure, I don't think he was above that.
And I'm with you in terms of the after shows. I think it's an aspect that Prince fans are so aware of, the mythical after show, and those of us who were lucky enough to go and see them, it's almost the bedrock of really why I'm such a fan is the live performance in that situation.
Because it was a secret that you knew wasn't going to get out to 20,000 people. It was only there for those 500 people. And it was something that happened that you'll never forget. And I would see celebrities. I mean, they were enamored enough with seeing Prince. I would watch celebrities see Prince for the first time. Yeah. But to see these incredible musicians, to be around front of house and just to watch him, even at the end in St. Bart's, when we were in St. Bart's on New Year's Eve, 2016. So, and we started after midnight, a little bit after midnight. So, but to see Paul McCartney there, and right next to my soundboard, and he came up to me and he said, "So who's going to do the countdown?" And I said, "Holy shit!" And I grabbed my mic, and I said, I grabbed my mic and said, "You are." And so I said, "Here," and I handed him my thing, and I tapped my Apple Watch.
10, 9,
and of course,
8.
But he counted so slowly that we got to 10, and I was like, "Okay." And he would
That's
10,
awesome.
9,
Yeah.
8,
Well, we can't talk fast.
7.
It's not in us.
And so you had these fireworks going on all these
Yeah.
ships, and he was only at number 6.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but to see celebrities see him, really incredible musicians watch him. I had a producer once, and you might know, Chris, because you're in that region. A guy came up to me after, God, I'm going to forget his name now, after a show in London. And I may have to come back with that because I can't remember the producer's name. Some producer came up to me, and a guy came up to me and said, "You're the engineer?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, that was the best live show I've ever heard, and I know a thing or two about sound. And then I said, "Oh yeah, nice to meet you, man." And he said his name, and I forgot. I feel embarrassed. I forget his name. And one of the guys next to me went, "Wait, are you so and so?" And he said, "Yes." And I'll think of the name, and you can put it in the show notes. And he walked out, and he said, "Scottie, you will never receive a higher compliment than that in your career. That you just got a compliment from Audio Royalty." And now I have to think of the name. It's going to kill me, but
what sort of era and age range are we
like a
talking
Trevor
about?
Horn type, big producer, British. I'll think of it'll come to me. It'll come to me in a
Yeah.
moment of levity here.
So while we're on that celebrity path,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, I've heard the story about Wesley Snipes, which I think is absolutely
Yeah,
fantastic. You know,
yeah, that was fun.
but throw out some names at us. You know, back in the Paisley days, would people just turn up to out of the blue? I mean, who would we be surprised? Because I think, you know, we'd expect Stevie Wonder to come,
Yeah,
you know,
you'd
play
expect
if he was
Stevie
in
Wonder,
town.
but
And yeah,
what it really was, more than being, there are tons of musicians, and that's to be expected, right? Because he's a musician's musician. The Nora Jones and the Steve Vais and the just from all different walks of
yeah,
music they would love, and they would show up, and I'd be like, whoa. And but it was really for me, it was the celebrities, the actors that love the Tom Cruises, the
mm.
um the
Matthew McConaughey seemed to be a huge fan
yeah,
out in
yeah,
the
and
LA
and
days.
and
Yeah,
Right.
yes, and the Van Zant, Steven Van Zant,
yeah,
they were shooting,
Mhm.
they were doing the Sopranos at the time, and he showed up in front of house in Japan. Weirdly, he just said, "Hey, are you Scottie?" And I went, "Yeah." "Oh my God, hey man, come in, bring it in." Like, what?
Did he
It's
pull
so
you back
odd to
in?
see him. And I said something to him like it was fun to me. I said, "Well, I'm watching your show, man, and I love it." And he said, "Scottie, the first thing we do when we get a script is we go to the back page and read backwards just to make sure we're still alive at the end of an episode." I thought that was really funny.
Yeah,
That was really funny. But it was really about Prince was really a celebrity's celebrity in general,
yeah,
right? Because he had he was such an enigma and so cryptic, and it's hard to manufacture that. He just sort of was that since he was a kid. So we
yeah,
all had that sort of. Now I didn't grow fully out of it because I still would get nervous on occasion when he would come in, but to the room, to the soundstage. But that was for a different reason. It's because I didn't know what curveball he was going to throw that day.
mm,
Um, can you move the soundboard out of the thing and still mix here? Can you do this? Can we play in an hour? Can we play just Rhonda and John and I in the atrium? I'd be like, oh my God, and I was always I always described it as being a firefighter.
yeah.
I was a firefighter. I was always ready to jump down the pole and go out and go put out the fire. So it was a different kind of nervousness, but I wasn't nervous around him as far as being a person, because we spent so many hundreds and hundreds of hours talking about musicians and mixing
Yeah,
and the state of the
and
music business and sort of that kind of thing.
absolutely. And in terms of I agree with you. He was kind of the musician's musician. You know, everybody,
Mhm.
regardless of stature, was a fan. But I kind of get the impression that he might have been a little afraid of standing toe to toe with some of these guys. Because if I look at the path that people find Prince through now, it's usually that "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" video, and that's one of
Yeah.
the few times where I saw him share a stage with someone, who was well known. In that case, several people,
Yeah.
where he actually pulled out and delivered.
Hmm.
And there's the story of that Michael tells Michael Bland of Steve Vai coming and jamming with him and Sonny, but
Yeah.
Prince doesn't want to get involved. He doesn't come
Yeah.
down to the soundstage. So
Yeah.
where do you think he was on that? Did Do you think he was ever frightened of standing? Because I would have loved to have seen him at like the Crossroads Guitar Festival,
Yes.
and go toe to
Yeah.
toe with a lot of those blues guys.
Well, he wasn't afraid. I'll put it this way. He wasn't afraid of anyone when he had his band with him,
Yeah.
when he was performing with his band. And I'm not saying that he was afraid then if he just went on stage with someone
Mm.
that was going to try and trade fours with him, you know,
Yeah.
trade 4-bar solos. Like I think that this is only my guess, but I would say he was just always in command when he had his band with him. They would go anywhere that he could take them anywhere that no other band could. They just
Mm.
couldn't. But he knew that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band, when we did that whole day was a really tough day for me because he had fired the monitor engineer that morning. So I had to do
Right.
two things at once. I was very busy that day running around. And then there was the time pressure, and then all the celebrities are there and all waiting for their turn and trying to get him sound checked and done. And but I remember him not being affected at all by that stuff. I think
Mm.
he knew that that was a safe band. They were just gonna play and let him. This is Prince, man. I don't care if it's Tom Petty. He was like, "That's Prince. I'm just gonna let him go as long as he wants."
Mm.
And then they started to come in and say, "As you are." They just would do
Yeah.
those single lines and let him go. And I was
Yeah.
glad to see that he was able to stretch it as long as he wanted. I'd be interested to know how long that solo was. It's got to be hundreds of bars long.
Yeah.
And it was a long, long solo. And he was able to develop a theme. And
Mm.
it felt to me during that solo that he started to develop, that he may be bringing it to a conclusion. And then he just never looked back and did one of those, like, I'm done. And the
Mm.
band wasn't going to shut Prince down. So he just kept not looking at them. And then he was like, well, I'm just going to keep going. So it was a little
Mm.
bit of that because we didn't rehearse it
So
that long. It didn't rehearse that long for sure.
yeah, so I've got two things absolutely about that. The first one is I've heard the real mix, or a different mix of that sound, because they have
Oh,
it playing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland.
oh,
It's part of something that Jonathan Demme had put together before he passed. Um, and you can
interesting. I
hear
didn't know
the
that.
other guitarist, who is Mark Mann, who plays for Jeff Lynne
Yeah.
and ELO.
Yeah.
You can hear him start to trade licks against what Prince is playing at the end.
Mm.
Now, that's completely absent of what people hear on the internet, and it sounds like Prince has run out of ideas, and they're just going to wrap the song up.
Yeah.
And in reality, he's actually giving space to that guy doing what he's doing. And I think it's
Interesting.
crucial that it's missing, because everybody accused people who are fans in those comments accuse Prince of grandstanding and showboating.
Mm.
And if they heard the real mix, where he makes room for the other guitarists to play with him,
Yeah.
it kind of
Interesting. Yeah.
dispels all of that. So that's the first thing just felt like mentioning. But the second is a question: the rehearsal. What's the real story of that? Did he get trodden over and didn't ever actually have an opportunity to do the solo?
No, I don't think he wanted to do the solo. I think he was just going to leave room for it, and then he would know what to do. And he was relying on them to know what to do when he did what he did.
Right.
You don't want to give it all away. And he was fully aware of he was acutely aware of his effect on people, and he knew he would be able to do whatever he wanted during that performance. And uh, people forget that we had a whole NPG, we had a whole show that we did. I don't know how long it was, half an hour or maybe longer, maybe an hour show. It wasn't maybe an hour, but we did our own set. And so
Yeah.
that was all at some point, and we had rehearsed it as well, or sound checked it. So I just thought he didn't want to give anything away. They were under time constraints. I know that because I kept hearing from producers, we got to go, we got to go.
Yeah.
And I had to run back and forth out to where the monitor desk was in the hallway and actually change things myself and run in. And I usually never run. I don't think it looks good and it looks professional to run. It looks like there's always a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell technicians, if a mic stand breaks, don't run out there, man. Just walk out and get it and put the new one out, and always keep your back to the audience. Don't turn toward the, like there's stuff that just was kind of cool and that I learned from Prince, like how to do it. And it's not that he taught me that specifically. I just knew.
Yeah.
You just automatically being around him for a certain amount of time, you earned some cool credit, right? You just knew what to do. And there were certain technicians like McGregor, the great Magoo. Magoo knew what to do. He just knew what was cool. And I remember the time that Prince's guitar didn't work at an after show. Didn't work at all. He started playing and it didn't work. And he just put it down like this and said, Goo, and Goo came over and the song's going on. And he tells Goo in his ear, my guitar doesn't work, fix it and bring it back to me. But you can't act like something's wrong. Just be cool.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And he said, how are you going to fix this guitar? And Magoo said, cool. And he said, right. Now, when I tell you, just laugh like I just told you the funniest joke ever. And we're both going to laugh about it so they won't think anything's wrong. And he said, go. And Prince said, like that. And Magoo went, and laughed and walked off stage. It looked like he was just having a conversation with him.
Yeah.
He fixed the guitar, brought it back. Prince played the rest of the show, and Magoo got better as a result. Yeah. And Magoo telling me, like, man, he blew my mind tonight. He did this, and he told me, and then I got better because I went, what a great way to cover.
It's like the concept of, I'll tell students when you're playing a guitar solo, if you make a mistake, don't roll over to the, into another note or whatever. Like, don't bring attention that you've effed up. You know what I mean? Don't give it that extra. It's that concept exactly.
Yeah, make the mistake. I mean, Van Halen would say it. He would say, make mistakes, or maybe it was even some of Prince's band, Revolution. But you make your mistakes in 2s or 4s. You make them in 4s, and you can really get away with quite a bit by making mistakes in 4s.
Yeah.
If it looks intentional, if not, it's just a mistake, and the world's just going to keep on a spinning. But I remember seeing Eddie Van Halen live here at either it was at Monsters of Rock at Metrodome years and years ago, and it was like Metallica, Van Halen. I mean, it was incredible band. Scorpions were on that one.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of bands. And Van Halen, I was there principally to see them, and they played. And Eddie, he goofed up the solo to Ain't Talking About Love. Now that's a motif. That's just a very lyrical motif that you just play 4 times basically. Yeah. And then he riffed a little. Well, he screwed up the intro of it, and then he did it every single time on purpose.
Yeah,
he did it wrong.
Exactly.
And then he did, and I just went, and I was in the crowd like 8th row, and I was like, okay, I learned something else.
Yeah.
Just keep amassing that. So your students can certainly learn from that. Just yeah, go ahead.
Scottie, I've got to ask. So when you're saying like that particular gig, the monitor guy was fired, this and that, did Prince do the firing himself, or did he give a look over to someone else to do it, or did he have a talk with someone to go out and talk to the monitor guy?
He talked to me. He told me, and the monitor engineer's name was Mike something, and he had done the rehearsal the night before. And then he said, I said, hey, Mike's gonna run the sound check, so he'll be out in that hallway, and he said, no, I don't want him here. You can go tell him to go. And I went, okay. He's like, no, I don't want him. And I said, cool. So I walked out in the hallway. I said, hey, just grab your stuff and go. Somebody will send you a check or whatever, but he doesn't want you here. And he went, really? And I said, sorry, man. And he went, just lumped his bag and unplugged his headphones and left. Walked right out onto Fifth Avenue, wherever we were.
Yeah.
And Waldorf Astoria or whatever that was, right? He just walked out onto the street right there. And I went, uh-oh. And I just somewhere I have a picture of the soundboard. And it might be me. I don't think it's me at the soundboard, but I remember saying, taking out an Instamatic camera and taking a picture of it, of where it was set up in a hallway. Like nobody will ever believe this.
Yeah.
So I had to run back and forth. So it was me who had to do the firing. But when he got rid of another engineer named Gordon Mack in 2014, great engineer, super great engineer, great ears. He said, no, I don't want him back. And I was pissed off, and because I knew it would make my job harder. And I've told this story before, but Prince said, he said, can't you find me a good engineer? And I said, we just had one, man, you know, but you fired, you know, you fired him. And he said, put his cane down, put his hand around my shoulder and said, I've never fired anyone in my career. They've all fired themselves. Now that's the mindset that he had. He never felt like he had ever fired anyone ever, that they fired themselves, but that's just simply not true. He had fired people and he had gotten rid of people, but he was curving the narrative, you know, in his direction, that it was always them. But he had some really skilled monitor engineers that worked with him and did a good job, and never got the chance to show it all.
Do you remember exactly what he did with his monitor mix or whatever to offend Prince or whatever it was?
No, Prince just didn't feel it one day. And Gordon had done many weeks with us on musicology. And one day I came in and I looked at my tech, Mark, and Mark just shook his, I said, where's Gordon? He said, just shook his head. I said, oh God. Yeah. And he was just gone. I don't know, maybe something, I don't know what happened subsequent or prior to that, but I knew it was going to fall on me. So when I was standing next to Prince and he said, they've all fired themselves. He said, how much time do you need? And I said, I don't know, like 10 or 15 minutes. And so he said, all right, bands, take a break till Scottie's done. And they all went down the stairway and left. And I went over to the desk and I just grabbed the mic and I went 2, 1, 2, and I just started over. And I saw all the EQ curve that was going on and these DMB wedges that are beautiful. And I just flattened it all on the digital. I just flattened everyone and went, take a little of this. And I just did it all myself. Yeah. And then he came up and tried it and he said, sounds good. And the desk sat that whole show with no one at it. Wow. The whole gig, no one at the monitor desk.
The advent, before we go from the advent of digital boards, so do you have any like nightmare stories of any gigs on the analog boards? Did someone spill beer on it? Did you have a whole bunch of channels blow out?
I had one gig in my career. I think that was my mulligan, as they'd like to say in golf. I was at Red Rocks mixing Earth, Wind, and Fire. And the show was about to go on. The band was side stage and the playback started. And just when the playback started, my power supply from my desk blew up. Oh. Literally blew up. And I looked down and it was on, there were flames coming out of the sides and front of it. And I looked at my tech Bernard and he looked at me. He looked at me and he went like that. And just when he shrugged, it went, and it made this horrible scream through the PA. And I quick tried to pull down the faders and it wasn't that. So I just jumped and jerked out the outputs and it went away. And Bernard has got, at Red Rocks, they have fire extinguishers. They have like 3 of them out there. He grabbed one and started putting it out. I grabbed the other. We're spraying this. So front of house is a cloud of smoke. And we didn't have a spare soundboard back then. And the opening act had finished their show and they actually wanted to get ahead of things and they loaded it out. They just pushed the desk down the hill. You have to use a chain and it goes down this hill and then lift it up. And then it was already on a truck gone. And I said, we're either going to have to cancel the show or the monitor engineer is going to have to run it from his desk. Just put up a monitor mix, put it into the PA. Let's get the show done. And I talked to the monitor engineer. I quick ran up to the stage through the tunnel. I forget his name, Mike something. I don't want to vilify anyone, but I said, you need to like put your side fills, just put, he said, I'm not doing that. I'll never do that. Well, I'd rather cancel the show than do that.
Yeah.
And I said, you're serious? And he said, I'm not doing it. I'm not responsible. That's your gear. And I remember that division he made between us. And I thought, man, that is the opposite of someone who's trying to get it done.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be this veteran sound guy, right? And he just wimped out and didn't want to do it. So I had to watch 9,000 people walk past me and throw beer at me and throw beer at my tech Bernard and just fill this console with beer. And they were all just booing and as they went by. And I thought, man, I didn't do anything to deserve that. No one did. That's what they call a force majeure, right? A act of God. And you just have to, they came back and they played that show 6-8 months later. And I offered to come and mix it for free. I said, fly me out there. I'll mix that show for free. Not that it was my fault. Just thought I'd do the right thing. No, we're going to have somebody else mix it. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So they do happen, but I think what's important more than the failure is what we learn from our failures. Because most of us in life aren't lucky enough to be the one in the end zone at the end of the game with the ball, or kick that goal at the end of before it goes into overtime or whatever. Yeah. Most of us have had losses in our life, and it's how we respond to losses that create all the opportunity for getting better. Yeah. That's where all the getting better is, and I firmly believe that as a principle architecturally of my life. So find the failures and just try and be a little better. Be a little better than your parents. Be a better parent than your parents. Be better at this. Notice something that's wrong and fix it along the way, and learn the lesson. Tell your kids about it, and try. And I tell my daughters, I say, oh, as I'm driving, I'll go, oh, pro tip. And they always perk up. And I said, pro tip, if you're ever here, because they're a couple of years away from driving, when you're doing this, make sure you're in this lane, because then you can, oh, okay, cool. And they make note of it, and, you know, just trying to see those issues and make and correct them. And I think that that's something that Prince did, and a lot of artists with whom I've worked have done in their career. They make mistakes. They do a record that doesn't go over with the Chinese audience or whatever. So they have to come back with a record that is more agreeable to Chinese principles of strengthening the spirit of the Chinese people. And, you know, can't get too, you have to pull your audience along, as Maurice White once told me. He said, I did my first 3 Earth, Wind & Fire records as simple as I could. Great musicians, but I did it simple. And then I started to slowly draw my audience into disco-y, Boogie Wonderland stuff. And I knew that what I wanted to do, I just needed to take time to do it so that they wouldn't feel so alienated by a completely different sounding record, right? That's the true master, a true genius at work, Maurice White.
I'm going to use that as a segue, and it's going to sound incredibly hammy, and I know that, so apologies. But Prince took us on a musical journey through his discography, and I get incredibly frustrated at this moment in time that the legacy, the image that keeps getting put out of Prince is still Purple Rain, given that the music travels so far away from, you know, that early-ish incarnation of him. How much have you been keeping up with the posthumous releases? And also, you know, do you have any thoughts on the legacy as it stands at the moment?
Well, for sure, less than people think. I've been, as soon as 2018 came, which was only like 2 short years after after he was gone, I started to go to China on a weekly basis. I would commute weekly to China and back for one show every Saturday night. And so especially 18, 19, 20, I was completely on another planet.
Yeah.
Almost I was like an astronaut. Yeah, I was like an astronaut. Yeah. And so then the pandemic hits and I didn't really follow it. But I've noticed what they put out when they put out One Night Alone live, the vinyl, and then the box set. I think it was called Up All Night with Prince or something like that. Yeah. I bought, well, no one called me and said, do you want a copy? This is this is literally your mix, the whole entire thing. Do you want a copy? You know, I always thought that was funny. Like, wouldn't you want a quote from me or some updated thing or whatever? So I went, oh, well, and I ordered them on Amazon, and they came, and I looked at them and went, oh, good. They left my essay in the center of it. Great. That's great. And I put them downstairs in my little area, memorabilia area. Pardon me. That's about how much I've kept up on things, where it affected me. And then this idea I have for the piano and a microphone actually going on tour to affect people in their, not really, I wouldn't say grieving, although it will. I mean, just the autobiographical nature of the show itself will aid people in their grieving. But that's a really good idea that they should do. Yeah, they could do that. But as far as the just releasing things that have been released before, that doesn't really do anything for me.
Sure. I think.
How do you feel? What is your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I have to give the estate a lot of credit, because with each passing posthumous release that came out, they included more and more vault tracks.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and the remastering. It's a shame that you haven't heard them, to be honest, because the remastering that they've done on, you know, albums that predate your time with him. So Sign of the Times, 1999, Purple Rain. we'll ignore Purple Rain because it was done by Prince and Josh before Prince passed. But the
I did
level
hear
of remastering,
1999, and I thought it was astounding. I thought that was
yes,
really well
yeah,
done, and they
and
deserve a lot of credit for that. Yeah,
yeah, and the quality of the vault tracks that are coming out. I mean, we were led to believe that these tapes weren't looked after very well. I'm sure they weren't, and that a lot of them perhaps have been reused over time as due to cost constraints. But the reality is, whatever they're managing to do with them, whether it's tech or I don't know if you could speak to it, but it's fantastic. And the quality of the Sign of the Times, which is, the more recent one, is just spellbinding. And there's 60 tracks of songs that were never released,
yeah.
which is, an incredible amount for any artist to have written and shelved. But they're absolutely spellbinding to actually hear now. And I'd quite like you to hear them because you were a fan before you even got to
Yeah.
work with him. So it's something that you would find interesting because
a couple of things come to mind though. One is that Prince released everything that he wanted released.
Mhm.
Okay, so that stuff was in the vault for a reason. I don't think we should keep playing WWPD because that's no way to treat it. Well, would he want this really? You have to. He's gone. He didn't leave instruction, so you do what you want.
Mhm.
That I believe in that. But I do believe he released what he wanted to release, and that an album was an album. It wasn't
Yeah.
60 tracks. It had to have the impact in 10 or 11 tracks or whatever. The second thing is that everyone in the family and then the estate and working with the music owes a debt of gratitude to Dave Hampton because it was Dave's idea and making his idea public about having Iron Mountain step in. I happen to know through other people that they listened to Dave suggest that on a podcast. And Dave was very aware of his suggesting that because that is the place for all of that. Not only music, but music memorabilia, movie memorabilia. Like Iron Mountain is truly a mountain of place that does that.
I mean, Dave worked with the Miles Davis estate, so he's
the chief curator of Miles Davis, estate. And so when Don Cheadle needed to learn how to speak like Miles and he needed access to all these things, Dave is who they went to unearth that and work with Don Cheadle for that. Dave knows what it takes to store and keep those tapes in great condition. Dave went to Prince on many occasions. I was there on one of the occasions at Paisley Park and said, hey, I think we need to think about doing this because these they would try, the tapes would fray at the end. So to spool them up, you were going to lose something. And if they would break near the end, you'd have to glue on more. And there's a procedure that engineers know. And the tape itself has to be treated afterwards in both cold and heat. They have to do both to keep these tapes. And what Susan built it was a bank vault kind of with air quotes climate control in there, which was basically a dehumidifier. And it was really a concrete room with a bank vault door on it. It wasn't what you had at Iron Mountain. It was a locked room with a fancy door on it. That's very different than what they have at Iron Mountain, where things are kept in varying temperatures due to the wear. They're treated a certain way. I think it was due to Dave coming in, getting the keys to the vault, so to speak, giving those to Dave. On a regular basis, Dave could go in and do what he needed to do to check the condition of the tapes, excuse me. So they would take tapes out with gloves, inspect them, never bring anything off site, take photographs of the conditions, make note of what tapes were in bad condition. All that stuff was used when it went to Iron Mountain. And I know from even the standpoint of cataloging the hundreds and hundreds of hours of hundreds of DATs that I turned in to Dave, every DAT that I sent back was cataloged and chronologically into after shows, into shows. So Dave took that mess that was down there and made sense of it so that when it made its way out in a vehicle all the way out to California or however they got it out there, it was in condition to do those things. It
Yeah.
simply wouldn't have been in that condition without Dave's. You have to know, not just an engineer. You have to know somebody who's basically a forensic scientist and not care that it's music. They're treating it as an item that they have to curate and keep in condition. And it takes real specialists. And Dave's the one that handed that off, because what I saw every time I went down there, even when I went down there in the early 90s, because I was a drum tech, Prince would say to me, go get this song, or I need the sounds from this song. And he would absolutely, the tapes that we brought up and put on the reels were in terrible shape. Some of them were in bad shape. I remember doing the song Sign of the Times and getting the sounds off that. And I remember how good it sounded on 2-inch tape. You know, it was like 24 track 2-inch tape that we spooled up in the studio. And I said, oh, I need that sound. And then I push a fader up and go, I don't know what that, no. Oh, I need that. I need that. And we would just record those the loops or sounds onto a DAT, take the DAT back, put it into an Emax sampler, and then Michael could trigger those sounds and whatever. But some of those tapes back then were in pretty poor shape. And then they had a flood. I mean, they had a flood at Paisley Park before Dave was there, and everything in the vault was, come on, you know, I look at all of this way. I'll end by saying this because I'm getting long-winded. To me, what's in the vault, to you, what's in the vault is important. To me, what's in the vault is not important. That's a very big difference. I think to me, the experience with Prince was live. That's what was important. And that's gone. So I've sort of been forced to kind of move on and just go in a different direction and think about other things in my career. And other people think that the answers or feel like this music is there and it needs to be discovered and they want it. I completely understand that. I 100% understand it and support that, because that's what's different about every different person wants something different. But I know that there was, again, Prince released what he released on purpose and didn't release what he didn't want released on purpose. So I wouldn't want to be the arbiter or the person saying this is going to be released, that isn't. It's too easy to say release it all. And I say, hey, if you want to really do the right thing, put everything out, put all of it out for free on a streaming thing, or get really savvy and ask some billionaire to fund a new tech platform that like the one I tried to have with Jason Franzen in 2012, invited Jason up, this mobile strategist friend of mine, really creative guy, and put together an app for Prince that all of his music could be released on that app. It was called 1Gig, ONEG 1G, 1Gig. And we did a presentation for Prince and he was all into it. And then he just shut the door on it a month later. And I thought, man, there it is. Why not release all your own stuff, all the vault stuff? Why not just release it on your own platform? It's easy. It could be done in one day. But that's something revolutionary Prince would do. He wouldn't release it just through the streaming platforms, and so that guaranteeing basically his family's making no money on it. Somebody is, but not him. So it's just how
I could go 100 different directions here, because I spoke to one of his relatives, and who, you know, was on the younger side of the family, and suggested that there was an app route that could be done, particularly around celebration. Because, you know, not everyone can stump up $4,000 to fly in and accommodate and rent a car and go see 3 days at Paisley. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of people around the world who would pay $100 to do it virtually, and it's far more lucrative to do that. But that kind of hit a dead end. It might in the future go somewhere. But this idea of, would he want it released? I don't know. I go back and forth. I think everything that he laid down to tape has merit from a, you know, because let me bring it back a step. I think this is the hardest working man that I know of in history. And I don't know whether you would counter that because you were closer to him and I'm just looking from 1,000 feet away. but I think it's a work ethic that is vastly underappreciated. And if anything, the legacy I want him for him is the music and the work ethic in equal standing. Because I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know anyone who's created that much output over that length of
Well,
time.
probably J.S. Bach would be a good first start. You're
Recorded,
talking,
you know.
yeah, recorded. That's recorded too, just in musical notes. So it does exist, and that's all open source. That's all free now. So eventually, it all gets there. But as far as his work ethic was one that I think the angle you have, it depends on your angle of approach. If we look at him as, I know Susan said, like, we're mere mortals and he was this. I think, to me, I don't approach it from that way. I just say he was possessed in a different way, which cost him huge shortcomings in his personality and his life to be able to do this. So while most of us would be mere mortals compared to his creative, musical, artistic output, there are plenty of us who had our poop in a group way more as people, with interpersonal relationships, the way we treated our employees and coworkers, with people that regarded people as far as their time and their energies, with people that understood and worked together with people to teach them, to people that want to teach a new generation of how to do it like that person. There are, so yes, and yes, and it cost him in other ways. So if we're just talking about a voluminous output of musical artistic content creation, he was almost without peer in our lifetime. But talking about being a successful person and having balance, which is my favorite word, and it has to do with what I do for a living, I don't think he was balanced as a person. Clearly, if anybody taking an objective look would say that wasn't a balanced person. So what he did is he took from one bank and gave it to another. So whether or not we measure that as success, well, then if that's your thing, then that you're welcome to that. I tend to be a fan of people that really can be creative and put things out and kind and respectful of time and energy and effort, and want to teach others. And what I value isn't what you value as far as Prince. So we're going to differ in those things, or I'm going to differ from Susan, agree with her in some respects and disagree with on a bunch more. But it just has to do with what you want out of it. And my thing is, I don't want anything out of it. Except for, if I may say one thing at least, that fans get what they want. So that's why I say release it all for free. There's my weak gauntlet that I've thrown down. Can you release it all for free? No? Okay, then there's something in it. And then we have to just come to terms with that. And I agree with that too, because people want to make a living. They have to look after the family members. There's, things, I wouldn't go on a tour with Kirk and that piano show for free, right? You can bet that.
Exactly.
So, yes, we all have self-interest involved, but I do believe that Prince, his work is important enough to get out to people that just want to hear it. So I'm a fan of everyone hearing everything.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to do that where it doesn't break the bank for the listener and it provides a decent income for all involved in the estate.
Right.
I mean, if you took the Netflix model and has all of the recorded, studio work, let's call it, for want of a better phrase, but every Friday night we're going to premiere a live performance, so it keeps people on the hook for that monthly amount. It could work. Of course, it could work. I would argue slightly. I mean, I get completely that he took chips from one side of the table and put them all on the I'm going to give myself to music pile. But I kind of, and this speaks partly to why I think Susan thinks this way. I see it like an athlete. You age yourself out of being able to do what you've done, and then you go have the wife, kids, and you get grounded a little bit. You learn how to take the trash out. you know, that kind of stuff. Once you've had this peak in your life, but I don't think, you know, he's one of the few where he never really stepped off that treadmill of, you know, create, tour, do all of the things because he was hyper creative. I don't think
Yes.
he aged in a musical career in the same way someone like Billy Joel did. You know, where Billy
Right.
Joel has found this wonderful sweet spot where he's still ridiculously rich, where he doesn't have to create new music and he just plays when he wants to. Prince never really had that, and I think had he, and you know, maybe we can point to 1996, right? Maybe if the baby hadn't passed, maybe he would have found a different trajectory and had that, you know, home life and, you know, taking kids and dropping them off at nursery and things like that would have forced that upon him. So I don't know. I mean, we could speak for 100 hours about this kind of stuff because it's life choices. But I think
But what it gets
ultimately,
down to, that's like a fan fiction. It's almost
yeah,
like one of my daughters is really into like Stranger Things fan fiction, right?
yeah,
You know, fans come up with all sorts of arcs and storylines about what would happen, and that's what you're doing for him, and
mhm,
and which is beautiful because it's your writing, you're coming up with an arrangement, a creation,
mhm,
you know, a structured creation that you're coming through. If only this, right, whatever.
yeah,
And I don't think it's a stretch to say he was a deeply flawed person who came up with incredibly good music. But
mm,
I get in trouble every time I'm asked if he's going to be heard in 200 years, because I always
mhm,
say no. I don't think he will. I think his music. Now Susan would disagree for sure, but his music is going to time out. We can't
mm,
even get through. You can't even subscribe to a physical newspaper anymore, because by the time it's delivered, by the time the next day of it's blowing into the street gutters of the streets the next day, it's old news when it gets delivered to you. So how do you think we're going
mm,
to launch into our voracious appetite of music? We're going to launch right past that unless you have somebody really doing a good job and it is nailed in like the Beatles are to the architectural foundation. It depends on the job the estate does, and how, and the family actually,
yeah,
and what they
yeah,
do, and the decisions that Primary Wave makes, and how
yeah,
many are they're going to sell to Chevy. They're going to sell Little Red
mm,
Corvette to Chevy. Are they going to do this? How are they going to keep him out there but then continue to have him not gotten tired of? It's all a
yeah.
balance.
It's a
And
massive balance.
yeah,
Yeah,
and to me, the reason I'm uninterested in it is not because I don't like Prince or didn't like his music. It's just that I personally
mhm,
didn't make the choice to, but I grew past having to care about it, because
yeah,
my role in his career was to make it, turn it on, turn it up, and make it
yeah,
sound good and affect the fans. And I still want to give that to fans, but remember, a huge part of what I did is now gone. An
mm,
element of what I needed to work with is gone. I can't just show up at a gig and play the whole gig without him showing up. I can
yeah,
in the case of this piano tour, and that's what I
yeah.
proffered as being the thing that I could help affect people with that. But I can't go back and mix One Night Alone live again.
No,
Where's
but
the interest?
if the estate came to you and said, because you know, my belief is that the only person who can really publicize Prince is Prince. He's the only promotional tool.
Mhm.
Show him live, and there isn't a single person in the world who won't be biting on that hook. But every other way of promoting him isn't going to work because you're missing the key element, which is him. So if the estate came to you and said, we want to do the ultimate live compilation, multi-tier box set to
Yes.
show and really put this out, the kind of thing that, you know, radio are going to snap up and
Yeah.
streaming services, wherever it might be, in conjunction with a Netflix documentary 10-parter or something like that.
Right.
If they said to you, would you mix, would you would you have to? Like, or are the tapes good enough that they wouldn't even
No,
need to ask you? They'd
I
just be
would
like,
say that
put them
that
out.
my involvement would be directly relative to what it means to have that out.
Mm,
Because I've already explained that I am fully aware that every cent, that I don't even have to know you and Brian well enough to know that money you made 7 years ago you don't have anymore.
Well, that's not true, actually.
Not with this
Well,
guy, but
then you're doing something better than I am. But all right, let me come at it from a different way, because that clearly didn't work. And then off air, you got to tell me what I need to do. But we can't, we simply can't have financial remuneration of something in perpetuity. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
Unless your money makes money. And if it's, and then it gets to the dirty degree to me of just being about money. That's why I say it's not about the money. If it's not about the money and it's for the fans, then release all of the vault free. What's the problem? And what you'd say is, what's the problem? And then you'd have the family members and their attorneys and primary wave people.
Yeah.
They would all go like this at each other. And the only answer they could say is, because it doesn't make us money. And if that's your reason, then you're already on the wrong side of my argument. You already differ from me. I say give it all out for free. But the reason Prince could give it out for free in the past, and I encouraged him to do so, when Pearl Jam came out with, they gave away their album free and then they toured. And I told him about that. I said, you hear about Pearl Jam? They're touring. They gave out their record and they tour live. And that's where they make their money.
Yeah.
And that was, Prince could have done that. He could
What
have
year
done
would
that.
that have been when you had that conversation?
2002, I think, when we had that, because I seem to remember that being around the time that we talked about buying a PA. But the idea
and
is that
you don't think that directly influenced his musicology idea?
I don't know.
Because
I
in
never
effect,
thought about that.
he did give it away, didn't he?
Maybe, well, I don't know. I've never thought about that. But maybe now that makes sense. I don't know. I wouldn't claim that anyway, but I never thought about that until you said that. But if you give away your music for free, then you just go and back it up by having stunning live performances.
Yeah.
But because most people can't perform live anymore like that, they have to make the music on the releases. They simply have to. It's the only way they can do it. Right?
Yeah.
I think so anyway.
I mean, I've kind of come to the same conclusion as you about the longevity. I think the way that we're going now, he won't be remembered unless they do something remarkable where they do start putting a lot of this live footage out into the ether.
Yes.
So that if you're a young kid on YouTube, you're going to find this stuff, and it's always going to be found because you know greatness rises to the top, the cream comes to the top.
Yeah.
But I think, certainly for me, we're going to time out. I mean, I'm early 40s. A lot of fans, didn't hit musical puberty in the 90s. They hit it in 1977 and were perfectly timed to take it in. They're not getting any younger.
Yeah.
They're going to start dropping off the mortal coil. At that point, where's the new generation coming from? If all they can do is bring up bootlegs and iPhone footage from as good as it was, some 2011 gig. So I think there needs to be a concerted effort. It's all, well, they can milk me till I'm dry with remasters and vault tracks of things I already know better than I know my own hand.
Right.
But how do you bring new people in? And how do you get that this is the greatest live performer I've ever witnessed?
That's a super good question.
And that's the battle that they're up against. Because if you don't get that treadmill of new people finding him and having the material to find him, he's not going to be remembered in 100 years. And it's strange when I see someone like Jimi Hendrix, where, I mean, like literally how much could the guy have recorded in such a short amount of time? But they're still knocking out box set after box set after box set. But it's only to the diehards. It never finds someone who's never heard of him and opens them up, or very few people. Yeah. And I think that's the territory that we're at risk of going into, especially if he's always this 24-year-old, telling Apollonia to go jump in the lake. It's like, this isn't Prince. This wasn't the Prince that I went to see from 98, from my first gig onwards. Where's the Coachella Prince, where he's the picture of health? He's a grown man. there isn't a load of misogyny going on that doesn't play very well. So I think it's a very difficult time. I've got a lot of patience for the estate because
good.
Nobody wanted there to be no will and all of the legal wranglings and everything that goes with that. But at some point, the patience is going to run dry amongst fans, where we need more consistent releases, and we also need a 10-year, 20-year target. What is the image that you want it to look like? Because I would like people to see Coachella Prince when they think of Prince, instead of the kid from Purple Rain. Right. Anyway, off my soapbox.
No, see, now you kind of, I think that we're on the same page about all that. And it's all about how do you grow the model when the model itself is changing? The model of how we operate is changing. Everything is streaming. Think about this. Prince didn't even see that. That's crazy, right? He didn't see full streaming and physical models go down, like the physical sales just drop off. I mean, CDs, when somebody hands me a CD now, I go, what am I supposed to do with this? My laptop doesn't play it. My hum, I don't have it at home. I mean, it's all on the phone. And when he knew it was coming, because
you could see him playing with it though, with Third Eye Girl and doing the live streams with them, And have you heard of NFTs? This crypto
yes, of course.
thing. I think he'd have been the perfect test bed for that. Hers new material. It's basically the MPG Music Club that you could wrap up in a digital token.
Right.
And it's everything. Here's your concert ticket. Here's your membership. Here's your access to the thing that we did in the studio this morning. And I think he would have been a perfect pioneer to push that kind of stuff forward. I wouldn't be surprised if there was, a few bits of Bitcoin on his computer or something, because he always did keep an ear to the ground of what was happening tech-wise.
Yeah, if he felt inundated, if he felt overwhelmed, though, he would pull out fully with tech. So I happen to know that just from our arguments over digital versus analog. And when he told me, you're going to make sound analog, right? I said, no, I'm going to mix digital, and then I told him, I don't tell you what guitar to play. It's just my choice. You can play whatever guitar you want. Let me mix on whatever I want. It's the idea of getting the music out.